So I'm going to actually start with just one poem from my first book, You Do the Gay Man in Different Voices. I'm kind of reading a little bit from each one on this tour since I've not been to California. And Brent sort of always, if he goes right before me, sets me up for reading this poem. We go from anal bleaching to further in. Go further in. So this poem sort of became very popular from this book. And lots of people have referred to as the sweetest fisting poem they have ever read. So there you go. So this poem is called Fisting You for the First Time. On the day Don't Ask, Don't Tell is repealed. You ask me to do it. Buy the Crisco yourself. Small tub, non-butter flavored. You come home to me in bed, willingly nervous. I tell you I will do my best to forge this new intimacy. You can't go back once you've had your whole fist inside someone. I remove my ring, the one you bought me to prove how much you love me, want to be with me, our attempt at normalcy. I strip off my clothes, lay a towel on the bed. Then we begin the art of manipulating space. Fists are really made for punching holes into walls, which we've never done, not even in our biggest, most brutal fights. Though there is that dent in the wall by the bed from the night you pounded it so hard because the bear who lives next door was having one of his Mamma Mia sing-alongs at 3 o'clock in the morning. But I don't even think you used your fist to make that dent, probably just the palm of your hand, which I've used to slap you. Punching seems so serious. Yes, fists are made for punching other boys in the face, stomach, arm. But even these fists we've avoided, both never being in an actual fight with grunts, blows, and blood. Boys will be boys. It seems as if our fists were meant for a greater purpose, a more challenging one, the gentle stretching of a lover. We are not the same as boys who knock holes into walls and faces, boys who can't control their obsession with everything ending in destruction. This is about connecting my body to yours. Halfway in, I ask how it feels. Your eyes tell me you're hungry for the adventure of it, for the story we will share with friends over brunch or drinks, and we will laugh, smile, hold each other's hands as we tell it. I keep going, pushing against everything your body has to give. A tightness more powerful than any boy's fist ever thought about being. It's the last bit that's the hardest. Or so they say on websites with men in black leather and swings hanging from bedroom ceilings. It's the last move inward that is both terrifying and satisfying. Everything warm and beating. Everything hinging on my fingers being able to bend down, scoop in, form a fist inside you, like a child you will never carry. I'm going to read the rest from my new book, A History of the Unmarried, which is really a book that chronicles my relationship with my partner and sort of my changing ideas about marriage, sort of against the landscape, political landscape of marriage being sort of a political issue and the gay movement sort of taking on marriage when maybe there was other things to maybe pay attention to that were more important, like getting fired for being gay. So it sort of chronicles those changes. It also chronicles the idea of sort of being, my partner and I have been together for 11 years now, but we have an open relationship, so sort of exploring what that means, how to be queer and married, and all of those sorts of questions the book poses. So the book is called A History of the Unmarried, but I'm going to read the first poem in the book, which is called A History of Marriage. And it actually sets up the entirety of the book. The book also relies a lot on 1950s, 60s references, which this kind of sets up a lot of the references that come back as the book continues. And it's in different parts. So part 1. My parents married in October 1973, fall in Indiana. The smell of burning leaves, browns, oranges, reds. The world shrinking down, preparing for winter, dying. 1973, the same year Richard Nixon said, "I'm not a crook," to a crowd in Orlando, Florida. And the American Psychiatric Association removed homosexuality from its list of mental disorders. The same year of Roe versus Wade and the opening of the World Trade Center, a year of change. In October, my mother stood in a wedding dress, white as Indiana winters. My mother in a tuxedo, my father in a tuxedo beside her. Families and friends and family gathered. A minister presided. Vows were taken. It was a wedding that set into motion a life, a family, a bond of two bodies, one man, one woman. It was the same year Jackson Pollock's Blue Pole sold for $2 million, and a gas shortage closed stations on Sundays, leaving everyone desperate for a full tank. It was October 1973, leaves on the ground, fall in Indiana. 2. There were days when we mimicked them, when we got down on one knee, a ring in hand, when yes I said, yes I will, yes, when we bought wedding magazines, made guest lists, thought of color combinations. There were days when our Midwest upbringing made a wedding, legally recognized or not, seem to matter most. There were days when you felt like a husband, like my father, like a shadow of a life I was meant to have. 3. Brides Magazine says June is the month to marry. Sunshine, flowers in bloom, the world exploding with new life, a new start. My sister married in June 1997. I was 14, she was 19. A young bride like my mother, again in Indiana. 1997, the year Timothy McVeigh was convicted of murder in the Oklahoma City bombing, and Princess Diana died in that car crash. Our faces gathered in TV light, crying for a woman we didn't know, a princess that wasn't ours to have. Sylvia Plath also married in June of 1956. She'd only known Ted Hughes a few short months. She was in awe of him, his poetry, his drive, but that didn't end so well, did it? 1956, the same year Jackson Pollock drove drunk and crashed his car, killing him and his current fling, not his wife. My sister never read Plath or Hughes, never stood before a Pollock. 4. There were days when we hated them, when we despised the wedding invitations in the mailbox, the gift registries, the bachelorette parties at the gay club, the girls bouncing up and down with pink plastic penises on their heads, which made us wonder if they'd ever seen a real one. There were days when we felt evolved, our couplehood our own, no wedding required, no paperwork, no public announcement. Then there was the day I slipped my ring off my left hand and onto my right, our symbol, our sign, not theirs. 5. Grace Kelly married the Prince of Monaco in 1956. She never acted again, but is best known for her roles in Hitchcock's Dial M for Murder in Rear Window. She died in a car crash the same year I was born, 1982. The same year William Bowen was convicted of being a freeway killer, one of 3. He admitted to killing and raping 21 young men and dumping them beside the California freeway, sometimes with the help of his friend Vern. He became the first person in California put to death by lethal injection. People say January Jones, who plays Betty Draper on Mad Men, looks a lot like Grace Kelly. Beautiful, blonde. Betty marries Don, a picture-perfect couple. Spoiler alert, it doesn't last. Raymond Burr, another 1950s actor who played Perry Mason, had 2 fake marriages and then a real one, which he annulled a few months later. The time of year doesn't seem to matter in that case. Summer, fall, the dead of winter. Later he met a man. They grew orchids together, fell in love, grew old. 6. There were days when we spoke of leaving, of moving to Canada, Spain, South Africa, the poster boys of marriage equality. There were days when we felt defeated by our own desires, our bodies moving in different directions. There were days we accepted the beauty of our love, our choices, our rules. There were days spent with other men, nights in other bodies, sometimes together, sometimes alone. There was the day we separated love and sex and placed them in boxes beside the bed, no longer needing approval. There were fights in the bright sunlight of our apartment and in the shadows of night where fights are meant to thrive and eventually die. Then there were days we could only bear each other, my body on your body, the world outside, desperate to define us. So I haven't read that poem much, especially in California yet. But I do like it because it does set up sort of all the themes of the book, and pretty much all of those figures come up in other poems. There's Sylvia Plath poems, there's another Grace Kelly poem, there's a Perry Mason poem, there's sort of all these other figures, there's Mad Men poems kind of scattered throughout. So there's kind of all of these elements at play here. The book also plays a little bit with language. One thing that has come up in the marriage discussion is sort of what terms do we use? So the 90s was really that big civil union sort of thing, and then a lot of people have moved more towards, a lot of cities offer domestic partner benefits, those kinds of things. And I always have found domestic partner to be a really weird term. I lived in Orlando, Florida for 4 years, and right before I moved to New York, and now I'm in Newark, they got domestic partner benefits. So my partner and I went and did it kind of as more of a sign of, like, we support that the city could do this. The city can only, that's kind of all they can do in terms of those things. But the term is kind of silly, and it also only gives you the right to, like, plan a funeral and, like, cut off, someone's life support if you have your little card with you or whatever. So I'm playing sort of with that language in the sort of theme, or using sort of Gertrude Stein as sort of a model. So this is a short poem, and it's called On Becoming Domestic Partners, Orlando, 2012. I take you to be my domestic partner. May we live domestically ever after. Isn't that domestic? Oh yes, my domestic partner is so domestically domestic, cute and domestic, domestically speaking. My domestic partner has the cutest domestic ass, so domestic when he sways around our domestic home, doing his domestic chores in the most regularly domestic way. I heard your domestic partner was seen with Jimmy's domestic partner, drinking domestic beers in your domestic living space. Is it true? Not very domestic of him. Best keep your domestic partner on a domestic leash, collar too. Domestic ball and chain. How domestic of my domestic partner. Look at him folding my domestic underwear in our domestic home. I'll cook him domestic foods for my domestic partner, and my domestic partner would domestically do the dishes. Domestically, we are quite happily domestic partnered. Domestic bliss, really. Domestically speaking, we are regular in our domestic behavior. We've learned many things domestically about each other in our domestic lives. We are domestic every day, regular and domestic. Domestic the same length of time every day. We are quite domestic. Domestically speaking, rather regular in our domestic behavior. Domestic we are every day domestic, domestically. So it's sort of just a play on that. All right, so I'm going to read another short. I've kind of read a few little short ones here in the middle that I don't always read. Matthew actually asked me to read this poem, so it's a good point. So this poem is called When the Indian Guy Cried During Sex. I wondered if it was at the beauty of our love on display before him, our clothes mixed in the open closet, which he could see from the bed where I moved inside him, where you kissed his mouth, where tears ran down his cheeks. But now I remember a girl in a poetry workshop a few years ago telling me never to write I wonder in a poem. But I do wonder about those tears, which probably had nothing to do with love, ours or anyone else's. Perhaps he was actually uncomfortable with my cock inside him, but too shy to say something, his desire to be a good guest star easing the pain. Or maybe he's really just an emotional wreck, crazy, unstable, with his own problems. Problems that thankfully aren't ours to solve. Now I'm wondering if I should have said he was Indian. It's just a fact, like it's a fact that he cried, that I moved inside him, that you were there, that afterwards you and I had Indian food in the city, and didn't speak of his tears, but laughed at each other, and wondered if life would always be like this. And so the last couple of poems kind of moved to New York, since I moved to New York before I finished the book. So the book kind of chronicles, I'm from Indiana, then I lived in Florida for 7 years, and then I've been in New York for 2.5. So this is sort of a subway poem, and it sort of mirrors a little bit of some of what Matthew's last poem he read, sort of that kind of 2-in-1 sort of idea a little bit. So it's called Doubles. Same train, same stop. Actually, let's try. I switched that. Same stop, same train. Two gay boys with cellos. One case black, one silver. They do not know each other. This is New York, where two gay men with cellos can be at the exact same place at the exact same time and not know each other. That's the thing about the city. There's always someone out there just like you. Your double. Might read the same books, buy the same clothes, play the same instrument. They talk. These two men with cellos, because that is what you do when you meet your double. Especially when your double is cute and gay like you. Gay as in the butt-fucking kind, not the happy kind. Though these two do look fairly happy, and musically talented too, or so I assume from the size of their cellos. That's a bad sexual joke. Cellos are the same size, I think. I know very little about music, and I haven't taken the time to look up cello sizes. I went to the symphony once as a kid. It was Halloween. All the musicians wore costumes, and I couldn't help but stare at the man with the udder sticking straight out of his crotch. Or was it a she? I don't know. It didn't matter at the time. These men, of course, are not dressed as cows. One is starting his master's today. The other is off to rehearsal. These cellos have brought them together, and because of that, they will be in love by 42nd Street. Or maybe 59th, by the way the one is moving his arms, his voice rising in excitement. This will be the beginning of something. And then we'll say, oh yes, we met on the subway both carrying cellos. How strange is that? But it's not that strange. That's what I'm saying. People meet every day in this city where people carry their whole lives in bags on their backs. Yes, this is the beginning of something, but also the end in a way. The end of mystery. They've discovered a double, but what they don't know is how hard the road ahead will be. The road that begins after that first date in a restaurant or a bar, where they will both be amazed at all they have in common. They will sit with wide mouths as they discover their shared love of Mad Men, Jackson Pollock paintings, and Grace Kelly. This will make them tipsy on the pure magic of it all, which will cause them to fall into each other's arms, barely making it to the bed, where clothes will be removed and sex will be made. For it will not be love, not that first time. For there will only be one cello in the room, pressed against the wall, its shadow stretching long and thin over their bodies, which over time will slowly pull to each side of the bed, discovering that secret spot where one goes back to two. So I'm going to read just two more poems here, kind of a funny one and then sort of one that sort of sums up the book a little bit. So this poem is called Ecstasy in Reverse. At 30, I'm hovering over a public toilet, not yet filthy, taking my first tab of ecstasy. Like a teenage raver from the 1990s, I'm cracking the capsule with my teeth like the gay dealer in Chelsea suggested. I swallow and wait, nervous. Of course I know other stalls are full of stronger drugs going into noses and veins. This is not my first circuit party. But my inherited Midwest devotion to sensationalized news programming has always made me drug cautious. I remember watching Dateline as a kid and witnessing their undercover investigations into the dangers of ecstasy. How some teens died after taking it just once. Of course I didn't know at the time that they were just stupid and didn't hydrate. Yes, I've done my research. Don't get me wrong, I'm no saint, but my high has always come from sex and liquor. I'm old-fashioned that way. Sometimes it feels like I'm living in reverse, somehow more responsible at 20 than at 30, had more things figured out too. Now I'm in New York taking ecstasy and working as a part-time English professor who can barely pay his bills. That's a lie, I can't pay my bills. But you are here, reminding me that I'm lucky in love. We find each other and walk through bodies to the dance floor in only our jock straps, nothing new there. We wait for the effects to hit us, for the lights to begin to blur, to stream with a thumping bass. It hits me first, tingles mixed with waves of nausea. I laugh, pull your hand away and back to my bare skin. Everything feels a little more intense, but then I want to throw up in my mouth, and I don't think I can, and I hate throwing up more than anything in this whole world. I mean that, more than genocide or child prostitution or Katy Perry songs. We follow each other to the bar to buy waters and then to the bathroom to piss them out. We dance, kiss, explore the sensations rushing through our skin like electricity. Later I laugh in your ear and I say, I still prefer gin. We find our way back to our clothes and then to the door. We link arms, walk to the subway station that is completely empty because it is 6 a.m. on a Sunday. We take the train back uptown, and as we exit the station, we pause to admire the yellow railing burning like egg yolks against a skillet or a speeding school bus. On the sidewalk, the streetlights streak together in the early dawn, creating one long streamer across the March sky. Your hand is tucked into my pocket, pulsing, tingling, and fully alive. All right, and then I'm going to end with the last poem in the book. So I've read the first one and the last one. I like to end with this poem because it really sums up sort of the book. The book poses a lot of questions, and it doesn't necessarily give you an answer if this is what you should do or this is how you should think about marriage. So I end the book with a series of questions. So this poem is all questions. And it's sort of indebted to a Diane Wachowski poem. I sort of really discovered her work while I was writing this book, and I really fell in love with a lot of her work, and particularly this poem that I use as sort of a model for my poem. So her poem is called Slicing Oranges for Jeremiah, and my poem is called Slicing Limes for Dustin, and Dustin is the name of my partner. So it opens with a quote from her poem. And what does it mean if his wife is unpleasant or dull? And what does it mean if his wife takes sleeping pills and walks in front of a car? And what does it mean to stand in a kitchen slicing limes for cocktails, limes for Dustin, for drinks we will consume, which will make us happy for a time, then horny, angry, sleepy, depressed, and maybe, if we are lucky, fully alive for just a second? And what does it mean that we can't eat as many limes as we want? That we can so easily get sick on the citrus, stomachs aching? What does it mean to care for a sick person? To wash his body, comb his hair? And what does it mean for a body to show signs of stopping? Or for a mind to get confused, to regret inaction, to do the things it never thought possible? What does it mean to stand here taking care of you, taking care of me? To find comfort in the knife puncturing the bright green skin of a line, green balls of light? And what does it mean to fall in love again and again with limes and drinks and the cutting board smeared with pulp? Or to go out into the city and dance with other bodies, to be on display? To have more drinks with sliced limes, limes cut by other hands, by other men in other places? And what does it mean for an old queen to say we don't live in the real New York? That it's gone, dead, that somehow only one person's experience is real? And what does it mean to never want to be that old queen, to never be that jaded? And what does it mean that we stood outside the Stonewall Inn and drank cocktails with limes on the day the Supreme Court struck down DOMA? Was that not real? And what does it mean to only look backward, to always be longing for another decade, another time? And what does it mean for two men to be protected under the law, to call each other husband? And what does it mean to know that if we ever want to leave each other, it will have to be official? Paperwork goes both ways. And what does it mean to become a housewife voluntarily, to slice limes for a husband, limes for Dustin? And what does it mean to be married, yet remain queer, remain two men together, two men in love? What does it mean? Thank you.